Hey, this is Michael Emery. Thanks for tuning into the Slow Baja. This podcast is powered by Tequila Fortaleza, handmade in small batches and hands down my favorite tequila. You know, I've long said it. Ask your doctor if Baja's right for you. If you've been hankering to get down to Slow Baja, you got to check out the Adventures tab at slowbaja.com. All my trips are there, from my vintage extravaganzas in summer and fall, and of course your meals are included on the fall trip. Good dirt roads, private campsites, ranch stays, great food, and great people. Let me tell you about my winter 2025 expedition. You know, that's already on the calendar, winter 2025. That's for you folks with the new stuff, all those folks, the complainers who tell me they don't have anything old, but they want to come with me. Well, the winter expedition is for you. We've got whale watching, we've got beach camping, and once again, that is open to trucks of any age. The common denominator on all these trips, they're small, they're immersive. We go slow. We say hello. Well, to find your trip, check out the Adventures tab at slowbaja.com. Now, stay tuned because I'm going to be adding some non-motorized adventures soon. So who's ready to go on a mule packing trip with me in the mountains above Loreto? You know, I just went and I can't wait to share a super slow Baja experience with you. And just so you know, I'm always open to help you with your Baja trip planning. And if you'd like me to organize and lead a private guided tour, I've done it. I loved it. All the pictures, all the information, all the deets are over there at slowbaja.com/adventures, or just hit me up at slowbaja.com/contact. Hey, big thanks to those of you who've contributed to our Baja Baseball project. You know, we launched our gear deliveries on my winter expedition. Michael and Matthew from Barbers for Baja were along for the ride, and we got to deliver that critically needed baseball gear up and down the peninsula. It was really, truly amazing. And on my last trip, I got to go to the state baseball championships and see some of our alums playing, some recipients of the Baja baseball gear deliveries. And congratulations to Guerrero Negro and Mulegé. The Austineros and the Cardinalitos won silver and bronze at the state championships. Big stuff. And it was really fun to be there and fun to see them. All right, well, please help us continue this vital work. Make your tax-deductible donation at the Barbers for Baja. Click barbersforbaja.org. Click the Baseball in Baja link, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really do. It is so amazingly gratifying to be able to give these kids this chance to keep playing this sport, keep them on the field, keep them out of trouble. Please check it out. Baseball in Baja link at barbersforbaja.org. Thank you. Hey, thanks for tuning in to today's Slow Baja. My heaping dose of gratitude goes out to Rob Tigert. Rob is a well-known guy in the Land Cruiser world. He races a 1967 FJ45, which is a truck that looks like mine, but it's a pickup truck version. And Rob is an amazing dude. He retired and thought he would build his old FJ45 into a race truck. I thought he was coming to Baja with me in the Slow Baja class, but it turns out he did the King of Hammers, if you can believe that, and the Mint 400. Well, anyways, after my super slow Baja summer vintage, I had a suspension problem. One of the leafs in my front suspension, the springs in my front suspension, one of the leaves broke, and I'd been trying to get my truck into see Rob for quite a while. You know, he's doing some amazing stuff with his truck, and I just thought it was good. You know, I kind of feel like I'm playing Russian roulette with my truck, taking all these trips to Baja, and I don't really have a Land Cruiser specialist getting their hands on it regularly now that's living down in San Diego. And anyways, got it in to see Rob and found all sorts of expensive problems. So Rob Tigert, thank you, amigo. He's got new suspension parts coming. Unfortunately, there was a failure in the installation of my ARB suspension a couple of years ago, a race prep shop down in Ensenada, which will remain unnamed. Anyways, they over-tightened everything, and the suspension was chewing itself up and damaging the frame at the same time. So we've got some welding work to do. We've got some new suspension parts on order, and Rob is getting it all sorted out properly, and I'm sincerely looking forward to driving that truck with a properly working suspension. Can't wait for that. Anyways, Rob, you are my heaping dose of gratitude this week. Anyways, on to today's show. I did a collaboration with the good fellas, Jeff and Jeremy, the DeConcini brothers at Motosonora Brewery in Tucson, Arizona. They released a Slow Baja Mexican Lager, and they made this Mexican lager, I don't want to say to my specs, but I told them, like, listen, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, it's usually a Mexican lager. And I told them the ones I liked and the ones I didn't, and they crafted a beer that's damn good. So if you're down in Tucson, you got to stop by Motosonora and have an ice-cold Slow Baja Mexican lager on tap, and maybe pick up a six-pack or two to bring home with you. There's a limited number of cases that have been canned up, and I've shared quite a bit of them up at Overland Expo and with some friends in San Diego. And anyways, if you're at Motosonora Brewery in Tucson, Arizona, check it out, because every beer that they pour on tap, they do drop a taco in Slow Baja's tank. And let me tell you, my tank is quite empty, and I've got some expensive repairs that I alluded to earlier. So without further ado, today's show, Jeremy DeConcini, we're talking Motosonora, we're talking brewing beer, we're talking Baja adventure, and of course, among other things, beer. Talk to me, Jeremy.
How do you like this distance on the mic?
I like that distance on the mic. Have you ever led a band?
No, but I've always wanted to. I'm mean on karaoke. I'm terrible at it, but I just love it.
Well, I think you sound pretty sultry.
All right. I've got my Barry White voice on.
Saludos, amigo.
Cheers.
It's Slow Baja. I'm in beautiful Tucson, Arizona, and I'm with Jeremy DeConcini, and we're at Motosonora, and we're drinking a little Mexican lager, the new Slow Baja Mexican Lager, and I'm pretty stoked about this. We had a sample last night. I'm going to have a sample right now. Look at this big pour. Holy Toledo.
It's low ABV. You'll be all right.
Oh, man, that's good. Wow, that's really good. That's really good. We got it right here. Right here. Come and get some on tap, in the can. Jeremy, why don't you tell me the story of this amazing brewery? You and your brother Jeff were traveling and drinking beers and thinking about the world in vehicles, and this happened.
Yeah, that's kind of how it went down. We had gone to Africa in 2010, my brother and I and a bunch of other people, and we'd rented various different sort of overland rigs. Some of us had Land Rover Defenders, some of us had Toyotas, and we were going to these various different southern African countries. And for those who don't know, Africa had a huge German immigrant population back in the day, so it has a pretty vibrant
beer.
Yeah, it's like a legit beer industry in Africa, and we really didn't know that and weren't expecting it. And so we were just driving around and talking, and invariably at the end of the day, the campfire talk was always about our adventures and the food and the cars and what went wrong with your car, and my car's great, yours sucks, whatever, and everyone was comparing, just sort of as guys do. And we also ended up talking about the various different beers. Oh, where did you get that? Oh, we picked this up in Namibia, you should try it. Oh, this one is imported from Kenya, it's great. Or maybe it wasn't great, but whatever. And so we just sort of came up with this notion that overland travel, and that includes just road trips and just sort of adventurous travel generally, the beer is an integral part of the fabric of that journey. And so we started talking about how great it would be to someday have a place where you could capture that essence and bring those beer styles to life. And that's sort of the genesis of Motosonora Brewing, and that was 2010. So it was a long time before we were able to pull it all together and end up here where we are now in the beer garden. But that was sort of the major inflection point where we decided to make it happen.
And you've been open here for 4 years.
Correct.
So you timed it perfectly with COVID.
Oh, it was sweet, man. We had a soft opening, and on Tuesday they shut everything
soft.
down. It was. It was gelatinous opening.
Yeah.
Half the people who were coming to town canceled. It was terrible. I mean, we genuinely had this conversation the next week where it was like, guys, should we just mail the keys to the bank right now? Like, if we're gonna go bankrupt anyway, shouldn't we just do it today rather than suffer for 3 years and all the stress and everything? And the guys were like, no, we got this. Let's fight it out. And 4 years later, here we are. And despite the turmoil, no regrets. I'm pretty happy to be here and sitting with you and in the beer business and drinking this lager.
Yeah. Hey, we're back. We had to take a quick break so I could adjust the camera and get all my lines straight. Doug Ogden is helping me out here filming this. Good old friend. Nice to see him in another state, in another place. Sorry he's not in his old Land Rover. But Jeremy, you were saying about the opening, timing-wise, probably couldn't have been worse, but you powered through it, and you've got a beautiful place here. So talk about the theme of this brewery and this brew pub and how that relates to your life.
Well, so like we said, or like I just said, we were talking about how beer and travel are kind of one of these, they're just sort of, they're completely integrated. And so that was, craft beer is kind of a local thing, and it has to have a brand that's authentic. And because we have traveled so much and drank so many beers in so many different places.
So many local beers, so many real beers,
yes.
So many beers of the, you're not out there drinking Bud Lights.
No, of course not. And I've told this story before, and apologies to anyone who's heard me tell it over and over again. But if I go to the Tucson airport today and have a Budweiser, I jump on a plane and fly to Chicago and have a Budweiser when I land, my body went 2,000 miles through space, but did I really go anywhere? Whereas if I take your FJ40 and drive Route 66 from here to Chicago, there's going to be some beers along the way. There's going to be some adventure. There's going to be some weather changes, bad, good, bad, all of it. And that's going to be something you're going to remember, and that's going to be part of your life forever. Whereas that flight, if you remember it at all, it's going to be because someone was next to you, bugging you or something. It's
right.
Not going to be a great memory. So and beer is like that. Partly it's just the nature of the beer production, and that beer does not necessarily travel that well. The best beer is closest to the brewery. So as you travel, your beer choices tend to get better the closer you are to those individual breweries. And that was a theme that we thought was amazing and would work great for us, and it's authentic because we love that kind of travel and that kind of adventure, and we love beer, obviously, and the various different styles. And sometimes you can even bring that, a little bit of that, into your heart here because of the theme of the place. If you come in and you look at a really cool vintage racing picture that Doug took, and you have a beer style from some place in Europe, but maybe it's Germany, obviously there's a lot of German beers, and you think of the Nürburgring or whatever, you can actually take a little bit of a mental trip while you're here. It's a little bit of like a kind of a fantasy land we tried to create here.
Sorry, one top of the glass was in the edge of the frame. Yeah, so I sent a message last night. We had a sample of the Mexican lager, the new Slow Baja Mexican Lager. And I have a classic car buddy here in Arizona who drives the beautiful Copper State rallies, a guy Mike Christodoulou, who I met on the Copper State, well-connected Arizona bud, great cars. And I said, you got to get over to Motosonora and check out the new Slow Baja beer. And he's like, how do I not know about an automotive-themed, adventure, drive-themed brew pub?
We tried to get them here. The Copper State Rally just came through here, mm-hmm. and I don't know what happened. Maybe they had too many breakdowns. They were staying out at Star Pass, and the organizer, Dave, I think, was trying to get some of the people down here who were in the rally, but I think they must have had a tough day. Maybe it was hot, and they were kind of ensconced. And I think we got the Copper State guys have been really cool to us in terms of giving us all kinds of cool social media stuff. We donate beer to them sometimes, and they invariably send us cool pictures. I posted one of a Ferrari Daytona with our Superleggera can.
I saw that.
So we have a little bit of a relationship with them, but I haven't been able to get them to parade through here yet. But one of these years, I'm going to make it happen.
Well, I think based on my drive this morning with your next door neighbor Marcus at Sonoran Rover, who's coming with us on our camp out, we'll talk about that in a minute. I think we're going to start our next adventure in Arizona here at the brewery. So we'll have a good party. We've got your taco lady all dialed in. We've got some Mexican lager, and that'll be the pre-party before we take off and do what we're doing. So we're going to pre-run an event tomorrow.
I love this.
So you can write it off in case your accountant's checking. You can write off our adventure.
This is legit.
So back to the trip to Africa, where this brewery was hatched. How does that adventure fit in your life? I mean, you've traveled a lot. We're going to talk about Baja in a minute, but where does Africa? I mean, I've had the great fortune of being in Africa twice, and a dear friend of mine who was in the Peace Corps in Africa said, when you go to Africa, you just come back laughing. Like, you just laugh at the world. How do you translate that adventure that spawned this business enterprise? And maybe that's too deep a question, but Dig in.
Well, yeah, man. It's sort of cliche. People say you go to Africa and it kind of changes you, but that 100% was my experience. It was profound and deep, and it was just a completely different way of living. It was similar to Baja a little bit, in that you're in this sort of frontier kind of world, but because of the history, the profound human history there, the origin of us kind of, and then the recent history of, the native Africans and European colonialism and everything. It's just this crazy melange, and then you throw the animals on top of it, and
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and and the crazy thing, just it messes with your perspective a little bit, because if you look at a map and you're going, oh well, there's a highway that goes kind of through the Kalahari here, and then when you get there, it's not a highway, it's a two track into the bush, and on the map it looks like this big thick line, and you're like, oh okay, so there's a even the guys who are writing these maps think of roads differently than I do, because if that was the States, It would be a 4-lane interstate. And so you go, okay, you have to sort of adjust your perspective and adjust your expectations. And, it's funny, we rented this rig. The truck that Jeff and I had was just a Toyota Hilux, but it had been fitted with a 1,000-mile fuel tank. And we had picked it up in Johannesburg, but the company that we rented it from had driven it from Namibia. And we drove it for a month, slept in it, multiple ripped tires, repaired the tires, replaced the tires, covered in dust, through the trees. I mean, we weren't super nice to this thing. I mean, we didn't want to break down, but we used it properly. And then after a month,
as expected.
Yeah, as designed and as expected. And then when we showed up at the airport, they're like, well, in Johannesburg again, guy comes from Namibia, goes to look at it, walks around with his clipboard, goes, good job, and then takes off. And it was that's a very different thing than the United States or Europe or anything like that, where everyone's just kind of, I mean, despite the dangers of traveling in Africa, of just being out in remote areas and things like that, there was a level of humanity and trust there that I think is kind of similar to Baja, where if you're broken down, people help you or whatever. It's not because of the heightened risks associated with being out in the middle of nowhere. People tend to help each other. We had a friend, we had to come back for some reason, and we had a friend who wanted to hitchhike into Namibia. And we're like, okay, dude. So we drop him off on the map, again, an intersection of what looks like two big highways. It's just, and when we get there, they're paved, but it was just a T surrounded by dirt, no gas station, no nothing. And so we just drop him off, and we head south. And he had his own adventure getting to Namibia, hitchhiking with a bunch of different people. But to try and send good karma his way, we picked up every hitchhiker we could between there and whatever the capital of Botswana is. Anyway, it was 8-hour drive, and we got people up, and they don't speak English. These are native Africans. They get in the car, and we assume we're going to the capital because there's nothing on this road. And we'll be driving along. After about an hour, they start waving frantically. No, this is where you stop. There was some ability for them to know that, oh yeah, the village is this way. You pull off, they jump out, and they just walk into the desert.
And they just walk in.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is where elephants and lions and everything, and these guys just like, that's just their life. And so it's a very huge perspective shift, compared to growing up in the United States.
Does that blow up your mind as an attorney, as a former federal agent? Does that just explode your head?
A little bit. It almost
assimilating risks that other people live with all the time.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's similar. As a Fed, I sort of assumed a heightened level of risk compared to your average accountant. So I was kind of I found it very satisfying. And maybe that's just a personality quirk. Maybe there are people who want to stay in the shade and don't let anything weird happen. And then there's some people who are like, what's over that hill there? And is there a weird animal? And should I be afraid of it? I don't know. Let's go look. And so I think a lot of people in Africa just don't have the choice. That's just how they live. But for someone like me, it was very intoxicating, to just go out and live by your wits. And, I mean, I had a 1,000-mile, range Toyota, so I'm not exactly barefoot.
For the record, Slow Baja has 150 on the original tank, and I carry 2 jerry cans, which gets me about 250, which has covered me everywhere I've ever needed to go. And when I needed that second gas tank after I drove out to Seven Sisters once in Baja, I pulled that gas tank and realized it was empty. So I had to actually get back on a wing and a prayer. But 200 miles is about my range. Ooh. Where I start getting uncomfortable in Slow Baja.
That's impressive, because Baja, even now,
Yeah.
fuel is still an issue. The old rule of thumb was get gas everywhere you can.
And you know what? Again, Baja's changed a little bit. Maybe it's a little easier than it used to be. So there are more gas stations. The Pemex doesn't have the full lockdown that it used to. So there are other VP. There's Chevron. There are other competitors. So there are other gas stations. But there are still a couple of places where there aren't gas, and you're going to need gas there. And so you're going to see Ernesto, and he's going to put gas in your tank in Catavenia. But interestingly, I was in search of diesel recently. Had some friends with a... Hey, we're good, Jeff. Don't worry, man. We're good. Yeah, I can't hear it. Hey, and I'm just going to make a quick announcement here for you listening at home. That hiss that is in the background are the misters here at Motosonora Brewery. It's 90-something degrees here, 92, 94, 95, something like that. We're in the shade. We've got the misters going, and hopefully you've tuned that hiss out. But we're at an active working brewery. We've got a fella here who's got a great cactus tattoo on his arm. He's got a brindled pit bull, and they're playing a little ball, drinking a beer. And, I hope you're feeling like you're sitting right down here next to me. And if you do come to Motosonora Brewery in Tucson, you're going to be able to get Slow Baja Mexican Lager on tap. And there'll probably be a can or two hanging around, because I don't think I can actually carry the 50 cases of this stuff that you've canned up. I don't think I'm going to be able to carry all that back to... I'm taking it up to Flagstaff first of all, and then I'm taking it to San Diego with me after that. So there will be a few cans for you folks to take home and drink this wonderful beer. Really, again, I've told you, I'm a tequila guy, but this is damn good beer. It goes down nice and easy.
Thanks, man. I'm sure every brewery owner says this, but we were really trying to make the best beer we possibly can.
Well,
and the lager game is tricky, so I'm glad this one turned out that way.
Yeah, and again, my beer drinking extends to lagers, and that's it. Again, I have some allergic reaction to something in beer. As they get darker and hoppier and whatever, I get to the point where I can't drink them. So anyways, this is lovely, and enough about my beer problems.
Well, I was having nightmares about this beer, because you never know until it's done what it's going to turn out like, and if you screwed up somewhere along the way, you got to dump it. And that's totally fine under normal circumstances. But because we had a deadline, I was like, oh man, let this thing turn out good.
So can we talk a little bit about the process of actually creating a beer, the profile,
Sure.
We walked through it last night. We're going to do it after the podcast is over here. Let's talk about how you craft a beer. What goes into that? And then we're going to get back to Baja. And I promise you folks, we're going to get back to Baja. But let's talk about what goes into crafting a Mexican lager or an IPA or whatever.
All right. Well, so, the nice thing about beer, I consider myself a sharp guy, but the reality is beer is hundreds of years old, if not thousands of years old. And on some level, you're standing on the shoulders of giants, particularly, the English and the Irish and the Belgians and the Germans who really kind of figured out beer. So if you really want to know how to craft something, you start by looking to history. So you have guideposts along the way. It's like a map. And so, to make a Mexican lager, you have to look to the Mexicans, obviously. And because it's similar to Africa, where Mexico had a ton of German immigrants, and that's why it had such a strong, industrial beer industry. Now Mexico's craft beer industry is starting to come up too now. So you look at what the original style was that the Germans had brought to Mexico, and then how the Mexicans had changed it. And so it's basically a German product through a Mexican lens. And so that's how you approach it from a philosophical standpoint. And then you have to, from there, you kind of take it apart material by material and go, okay, well, how can I do this and be true to what I'm trying to do, but also make it our own and slightly unique? You want to be respectful of history. Like, you don't want to come up and do something.
You're not trying to copy a major brand.
No. I'm not saying let's just try and make a Tecate.
Yeah.
No, it's like, well, how do you make this a Motosonora beer, but also be respectful of the people who came before you, and also learn from them. And I think brewing beer, this may be a little heavy-handed, but I think it's a responsibility. We have a responsibility to tradition, but we also have a responsibility to try and innovate, or at least make something that other people aren't tasting. Otherwise, I would just go buy beer. if we're going to make it,
Yeah,
you have to make it your own.
There's a cheaper alternative. It's right there in every 7-Eleven,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
every liquor store.
Way cheaper than
so you
building a
have to
brewery.
you have to bring some magic to the formula, and you've brought some.
Well, thanks.
So walk me through what happens from the grain that comes in and how that transfers to this.
Okay. Well, I'll give sort of this could be a 3-day lecture because there's a lot
Perfect.
of
I'm gonna break into the one in the back here so people can't see it.
there's a lot of science and biochemistry to it, and microbiology. But the truth is that if you've ever heard the phrase "from grain to glass," it's kind of like from farm to table. Sounds good.
That was for you folks.
You start with barley, generally speaking. There's also wheat beers, and we usually start with European 2-row barley, or in certain cases in the Americas, 6-row barley. I'm going to try not to get too down on the weeds and keep you guys engaged. Basically, you take this barley that's gone through a process called malting, which I won't get into. You end up with malted barley. We run it through a mill, which cracks open the kernel and allows access to the starches that are in that kernel. So you run all this barley through a mill and then put it in this giant vessel called a mash tun. You soak it there in hot water. You make like a tea sort of thing, and that sort of converts those starches into fermentable sugars. And so you end up with this super, like almost looks like a bowl of oatmeal, like super watery oatmeal that you end up with that's very sweet tasting. You transfer the liquid out into the next vessel, which is called a boil kettle, and you're left with that grain. And now people often ask, what do we do with that grain? We feed it. It's still got a ton of nutrition in it. It usually goes to farmers that pick it up and take it out of here. We have farmers that come and take it. Big industrial breweries, I think, have to pay to take it away, but we're lucky enough that we're small and we can find a use for that for some animals. Then you start boiling that liquid that's now in the boil kettle. And what that does is it kills any microorganisms that were living on that.
This is just like Africa.
I know,
We got one fly that
It's
really
great.
says, you know what, this guy tastes so good.
He's having a beer.
He tastes like Mexican lager, Slow Baja. I want that guy.
So you boil that sweet liquid, which is called wort. A lot of the brewing terminology comes from the Germans, so there are things called, thank you, Vorlauf, Sparge, wort, like all these strange sounding names to us, but that's just the terms of art that we use in brewing. Anyway, so you have this wort and you boil it that kills all the microorganisms that are on there, and that's when you start adding hops. And hops originally were used as an antimicrobial. Pre-hop European beer, they would use dandelions. They were just kind of flavoring them, trying all kinds of different things. People still make that kind of beer, and they call it gruit. I've never had one, or I've never had a good one, so I don't know what it's supposed to taste like.
I've never had one, or I've never had a good one.
And the hops also added flavor, even though that wasn't the original design. And the earlier during the boiling process, the earlier you add them in, the more bitterness they add. The later you add them in, the more aromatics and flavor they add. And then as a side note, for the people who are fans of IPAs, it stands for India Pale Ale. And the story of that beer was that when the English were making beer for export to their colony in India, because of the antimicrobial properties of hops, they loaded them up with hops that would survive the voyage in those wooden barrels. And then as it turned out, people really liked hops. And so then they started selling them domestically. And then the American craft brewers took hold and just blew that up. But back to the boiling and the hops. After that, you run it, it's coming out of there boiling hot. You run it through a heat exchanger, drops it to fermentation temperature, which for an ale is about 68 degrees. For a lager, it's about 52 degrees. And now you have this super sweet liquid going into a fermentation vessel, which you'll see later. And the old brewing saying is that brewers make wort, that liquid coming out of there. So that's where all the brewing is done. And the real workhorse there is the yeast. Yeast makes the beer. So this microorganism you throw into that fermenter, it starts eating those sugars and turning them into carbon dioxide and alcohol. And then when that's done, you have beer. So I'm sorry if that was a little long-winded.
No, it's good. And this beer is great. So
Thank you.
No, but I think that's an interesting thing that, again, this magic comes. And this magic has been around for centuries.
It does feel like magic. Kind of.
No, it's magic. I gotta tell you, it's magic.
And the Europeans, before they knew how yeast worked, they thought it was God, because they would make this liquid, they would open a window, and magically to them, or spiritually, religiously, whatever, it would turn into alcohol and turn into beer. So before we knew what those single-celled organisms were called yeast, it was God.
Yeah. We're going to take a moment here, take a break, and I'm going to tell you about Baja Bound Insurance. And if you're heading to Mexico and you're driving, you're going to need Mexican insurance. And my wreck is Baja Bound. I've been with them since 2006. It is their 30th anniversary. Go with the best. Baja Bound. We'll be right back with Jeremy DeConcini at Motosonora, and I'll have 4 or 5 more beers before this podcast is over, so stick around. It's going to get fun. Here at Slow Baja, we can't wait to drive our old Land Cruiser south of the border. And when we go, we'll be going with Baja Bound Insurance. Their website's fast and easy to use. Check them out at bajabound.com. That's bajabound.com, serving Mexico travelers since 1994. You know, I don't always drink beer, but when I do, it's a Slow Baja Mexican Lager from my friends at Motosonora Brewing in Tucson, Arizona. If you're in Tucson, hell, if you're anywhere in Arizona, get yourself over to Motosonora Brewing, order up an ice-cold Slow Baja Mexican Lager, and if you love it, pick yourself up a 6-pack to go. That's right, you can get it right there in the cooler, right there at the brewery. That's Motosonora Brewing in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, we're back with Jeremy DeConcini. We're at Motosonora. We're sipping this amazing Mexican Slow Baja Mexican Lager that Jeremy crafted for me, and I'm just so stoked to have this and have it here on tap and to have some beer to share at the Overland Expo. So let's talk about you and your relationship to adventure. You've spent a lot of time. You're a surfer. You spent a lot of time in San Diego, a lot of time in Baja. Let's get on to some Baja stories. You have some.
Yeah.
You went down as a kid with your dad, and I just want to hear about these stories, stuff that it just warms my heart. We talked a little bit about last night. I said, save it. I don't want to hear it now. I want to hear it twice. Tell me tomorrow.
I think for me, Baja was inevitable. I grew up in Tucson, and it was my brother who'd gone to whale watching with my dad, but I was always going to mainland Mexico with my dad when I was a kid, and to me, that was some sort of magical place where they spoke this exotic language, and I could be 12 years old, sit at a table and order a beer, and no one would think twice about it.
Bring
and
the kid
I was
a beer.
also, and I partially blame Bruce Brown. I was
everybody does.
I was into dirt bikes, and I watched On Any Sunday religiously, and I was into it. And then at some point, I stumbled across The Endless Summer.
Yeah,
and then
it just screwed you up for life.
Yeah, I already loved Mexico. I knew that moment I was going to be a surfer, and I was into dirt bikes, and so like Baja was like a vortex. It just sucked me in, and so from there, I think I don't know if this was my first trip, but my first big trip. I convinced my brothers and my dad to take motorcycles all the way down the peninsula. We were going to take a month. And my dad was like, okay, I'll do it, but, I'm not riding a motorcycle for a month. I'll take a Jeep. I'll carry all your stuff. You guys ride the motorcycles. And while I felt that it changed the trip a little bit, it did mean I could bring a surfboard. Because that's the thing. Loving motorcycles and loving surfing are kind of mutually exclusive, situations.
Yeah, you can't bring a motorcycle. You can't bring a surfboard on a motorcycle most times.
I've seen
Baja.
people do it, but it
different.
makes the riding even more dangerous.
Exactly.
And it's kind of limited. So we took off. We left due south from here. And I don't know if they still run that ferry, but we took the ferry from Guaymas to Santa Rosalia.
Okay.
And I remember, we were kind of kooky then. We got to Guaymas in the dark and we were camping. And maybe it was too late to set up camping gear because I think we had tents, but we ended up sleeping on the ground and the bugs were crazy. I had this a neckerchief over my face to keep the bugs off and a cowboy hat crammed down on it. And it was a terrible night.
That's the way we used to do it, folks. We used to just put something over our face and cram down a cowboy hat and hope for the best.
Right? I mean, it sounds nuts now. Anyway, and then we wake up in the morning, and because we'd made camp in the dark, there were a bunch of dead horses around.
Oh, no wonder where the bugs were.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So then we go down to the ferry dock, and we're sitting there waiting on the ferry. My Spanish was pretty bad then. And we figure out the tickets, and of course, the ferry was late, and we're just sitting there. And finally, we get on the thing, and it had like a 10-degree list. And we just leave port like that.
So Mexico.
Yeah. And if you look at all the
Mexican.
photos from that time on the deck of the boat, everyone's lined up. But in the background, the ocean looks tilted, right? Because we're all shooting like this. So we get to Santa Rosalia, and this is 94. So, Cabo wasn't what Cabo is now. And I mean, most of Baja is relatively, is unchanged. But Cabo is one of those things that's just changed dramatically.
Yeah. Last 30 years for sure.
Yeah.
20 years.
We camped on the beach in front of Zippers and paddled around to Old Man's and La Roca and all those surf spots there were some people around, maybe scattered houses, but we're camping on the beach, and it's all high rises now. And so, we were there for a month, and that was another life-changing one, that sort of every time, I don't know if you were like this, but I always thought I would do this and just see how it would go, and maybe I'd reach my limit and be like, okay, that was cool. I guess I'm going back to my safe couch. But, each little bit of adventure just made that desire grow stronger.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was talking about earlier.
There's a magnetic
hill?
pull there, wasn't there?
Yeah, for sure. And then Baja, between the waves and the off-roading and everything, sucked me in from that point. I mean, until last year. I mean, I've just been going constantly since then. And some of the conversations we've had about the different places and what they've done over the year. And in fact, I wanted to ask you, we were talking about shipwrecks in northern Baja, and I surfed there the first time, and I was just blown away by this ship. It was intact at the time, this big, beautiful ship that you surf around.
Almost gone now, I hear.
I guess that was what I was going to ask.
Yeah,
I went 10 years later, and it had
Yeah.
broken in half. It was still recognizably a ship, but it was deteriorating quickly because in my mind, when I first rolled up there, it had probably been there 100 years. You know what I mean? But it turns out, I think it only been there like 10 or 20
15.
by the time I got there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Hey, so let's talk about that trip with your dad. You took your brother
Yep.
Jeff, who's sitting right here out of the camera's view. But what the hell was Dad thinking? Taking his boys to Baja for a month. How old were you guys?
You know, I was 20, Jeff was 23, my younger brother was 18, my youngest brother was 16. So we were not, I mean, but
What
my
a
dad was
perfect
kind of
time.
a wild man.
What a perfect time.
Oh, it was
16,
incredible.
18, 20, 23.
Yeah.
LFG.
Yeah,
Let's go.
It was great. It really was a great experience. And, it wasn't without trouble. My younger brother and I had a motorcycle collision, and I managed to keep it up. He went over his handlebars, and he got pretty hurt. He had to go to the hospital in La Paz. And, these are, totally survivable injuries. He broke his collarbone, some ribs, and things like that.
Broke his collarbone and some ribs. How did that get reported to Mom? Can we just cut to that?
Mom was not enthusiastic about this whole situation.
Exactly.
She was not at all. But he had to fly home. He was done riding, and then we had to sort of rig his motorcycle to the back of the Jeep to get it back. So we took the front wheel off, threw it on the roof, and then hooked up the front forks to the tailgate of the Jeep, and just had this thing dragging behind.
That was in
us.
the days before you had the ubiquitous bike carrier on the front or on the back,
Indeed,
right?
yeah. Nobody had dreamed that up yet. Although in retrospect, it's the simplest thing in the world. Why would we not have done that? So
your brother had to fly home. Mom said, "I told you so."
Yeah, for sure, but not so much. I think she was just happy to have him back. So it wasn't enough to keep us, going down there and without too much trouble. I mean, I guess at that point we're adults, but yeah, I mean, I still have a good relationship with my mother now. She's however angry she was at me about it, she's gotten over it.
And we're just talking just after Mother's Day. We're Monday after Mother's Day, so it's good to know. Jeremy, you came out last night and took care of me. We had a couple beers here at the brewery, and then you got me ensconced in my hotel. So thank you for that and making some time on Mother's Day to do that. Karen's down at the end of the table. Hello. And Jeff's right here out of camera shot. So we're going to start the rounding second base, heading to third, and rounding third and heading for home here on the Slow Baja podcast. We have a little adventure coming up.
Indeed.
And you are in charge of the whole damn thing. I said to you today, what do I need to do? Like, I don't travel with food. I don't have water. I don't what are we doing?
I farmed. I'll be honest. I farmed some of it out to my brother, but the idea was.
So we're on a camping trip.
Correct.
And we're with four vehicles plus mine now.
Might be five.
5.
Yeah, it might be 5 if Marcus shows.
Yeah, we'll see Marcus Norton Rover. We got Jeff and Jeremy and Peter Wilkie. He's a blast from the past, a friend from another life. When I used to be at Bring a Trailer, Peter Wilkie, I put in two separate movies in my life. He's a good guy.
He's a really good guy.
Really good guy. And he's going to be in his Land Rover Defender. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to have an adventure. Can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, we're going to take what's called the Arizona Backcountry Discovery Route, and I know this is
what's the acronym?
AZBDR.
We're going to do the AZBDR, folks, and we're going to be drinking Motosonora Mexican Lager. And Peter Wilkie's going to be in charge of all the food, which is awesome because he owns Time Market, and he's a foodie and a beer snob, and he said this beer's good.
Oh, yeah, and he's not even a Mexican lager guy, and he's he's a little nervous.
He hates
he
the
drank
stuff.
it. I don't think he'd lie to me. I think he genuinely liked it.
It's good, for sure.
Yeah, and luckily, the AZBDR runs through Flagstaff, which is where the Overland Expo is. So, when we started talking about this Arizona Overland trip and we looked at the route, I was like, oh, this is perfect. So we're going to leave here tomorrow morning, head to Benson, Arizona. The full AZBDR goes border to border. We will not be doing that, but we'll be going from Benson to Flagstaff, over a couple of nights. And it's just a 4x4 route through the state of Arizona. I think there are BDRs at this point through almost all of the western states now, that thankfully some brilliant motorcyclists came up, just tried to link a trail through a state, without with touching the minimal amount of pavement as possible. And one of the coolest parts of this trip that we're going to go is up the Mogollon Rim, and that road kind of switchbacks up. And from the photos I've seen, or at least I think I've seen, because I've never done this route before. Fair warning, we're kind of winging it.
Nor have I.
I think it's going to be amazing. And luckily, my brother was willing to really get behind the route planning. I was like, Jeff, this is the goal. I'm like, can you give us some ideas about like what we need to do? He's like, all right, here's where, and he loves maps. He gets in and goes, I think we can camp here. I think we can camp here. We have two choices. We can go here or here. This one has a creek, with a cool running water. It's going to be amazing. This one has a campground, maybe. We'll see which way we want to go. And so we'll just have to make some decisions on the fly. I mean, it will be sort of a little bit improvised travel.
And that I think is so important in a world now where we have every answer to every question that you could ever conceive of. And there's a Facebook group and, an app, something to tell you everything that you might want to know. It's hard to actually have an adventure now with all the information that's out there.
For sure.
That
you kind of have to
say that, your adventure isn't just an adventure that you're rinsing and repeating from somebody else.
Right.
So let's get on to that for a second. So Africa, Baja, with your brother breaking his collarbone going over the handlebars of a motorcycle, and what Mom must have thought once she got the word of what the hell happened there. Why is adventure important? Why is it important to you?
Well, for me, and I assume for a lot of people like me or maybe like us, I think it is truly how you feel alive. I think because, we're an intellectual species, we're able to read and write and do all kinds of create our environment. We have misters, we have music. We can build whatever we want.
We've built surfboards.
Yeah, totally. And so to get into
and
an unpredictability.
Well,
that's a nice thing. Surfing's kind of like that too, because the ocean is incredibly unpredictable. So when you go surf, you're at the hands of the universe in a lot of ways, from the solar energy that created the wind, that created the waves, to the marine life that may or may not find you snackable. So adventure is the same way, where it makes you feel alive, just being out there and being in an unpredictable way. I think humans, or at least humans like us, if you take away all the unpredictability, I find that creates anxiety. I need to be in a slightly unpredictable environment and on an unpredictable quest. And, I'm still human. And so there's maybe this sort of hero's journey thing. I mean, anyone who's ever read the Odyssey, I mean, at least, like I said, and people like us, you read it and you're like, well, that sounds kind of cool. Like Cyclops?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's rad. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
Spend some time with the Lotus Eaters. Let's have fun. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what it is. To me, it makes me feel alive, and the risk. It's no risk, no reward. So yeah, it's possible we could have a breakdown, when we're gone, and maybe somebody could get bitten by a snake. I'm hoping none of these things happen. We're going to try, and we're going to be smart, and we're going to be safe. But at the same time, that's it's out there, and it's something we've never done before.
We have toe straps and tequila.
Yeah.
And we'll have a lot of this Motosonora Mexican Lager, the Slow Baja Mexican Lager. So I think when we get through it, I feel confident that we'll get through it. Although, you know what? I got to tell you, I haven't spent a lot of time camping in the United States, and I never camp when it's 90 degrees.
Well, so I think we're going to be okay.
I'm a little worried, more worried than I would be to go into remote parts of Baja. I'm a little worried to be going out, hanging out with you guys. But you've got a Porsche Cayenne, so I think I can hang with you anyways.
Oh, yeah. It's on street tires, too.
Exactly.
And that car is more capable than you'd think.
No, I know. I mean, listen, on the Baja XL Rally, I was with a couple of Cayennes, and they were amazing.
Okay. Oh, and, so you've seen them in action.
These were Cayennes that had been bought on the cheap and had been ridden hard through Baja. And the folks who own them really had a great time. So I've seen what they can do, but I think they will be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, as a side note, as a Porsche guy, and you're a former race driver,
That's
I think
generous.
Porsche,
Thank you.
Yeah, he's like, oh God. I think Porsche really knew what they were doing when they built that car, despite their sort of mediocre looks. They're incredibly capable vehicles. Yeah.
So bring it home for me, Jeremy. We've talked about a lot of things here, Africa, how you came up with the brewery, some Baja adventures. We haven't talked enough about Baja, but folks who are coming here to Tucson, or folks who are in Tucson who want to find you, Motosonora.com.
Correct, yeah. Website, Motosonora.com, at Motosonora Brewing on Instagram. And we are on Facebook, although mostly I just kick everything from Instagram to Facebook. I think you could probably call me a Luddite on some level, that I'm not awesome at social media. However, the good news about that is I'm the guy who answers all the responses on Instagram and on the website. So,
yeah, no,
so
you are
can reach
fully
me.
present.
Yeah,
you are on top of it.
And I'm not good at work-life separation. So you can
Yeah.
pay me on the weekends. I'm probably available.
No, you've been very generous as far as staying in touch with me. Close it up. Why the hell did you make a Slow Baja Mexican Lager? What intrigues you about this collaboration? And I'm being a little self-serving here, but I'm just tickled that we're sitting here drinking this magnificent beer at your magnificent brewery, and I'm gonna ask you to say what the hell's wrong with you.
Well, it's easy. I mean, I was a fan of the show, and I can't remember which episode it was, but you were talking about sort of paper maps and people who overplan and overdo everything. And I was just like, it really spoke to me. And that was, I reached out. I was like, I think we're kind of simpatico here. And I'm a beer guy, I'm a Mexico guy, and I have a factory available. Is there some way that we could do something cool? And,
Yes is my default answer.
Right? Yeah.
I pressed the yes button.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
the answer is yes.
I'm just incredibly pleased at what you're doing. I mean, quite frankly, the work you're doing and the show, which I listen to all the time. I couldn't be happier to have participated with you guys. With you, I'm sorry, on this project.
Sorry, Karen was offering us another beer. Yes, the answer is yes, Karen. Sorry. You saw my glasses.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen.
Look, for the photos that'll hit Instagram after this adventure, you'll see the various participants behind the camera.
You
here
see
who
this
are
big
supporting
slow
us.
pour?
That's pretty good.
Trying.
Look at the bubbles.
That's right. I'm looking for a job, Jeremy. You got anything going on here at the brewery?
I mean, we're always hiring bartenders.
Perfect. I can pour beer. I can't craft a cocktail, but I can pour beer. I'm going to pour the whole one in my.
Yeah, go for it.
You look like you're doing all right over there.
Yeah. I got a little time left on this one.
And we're making a little
Cheers.
drinking and podcasting here, folks, on the Slow Baja. You've said enough nice things about me. Let's get back to Baja. There have been some tough frickin' times in Baja in the last 2 weeks. You're a surfer.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're heading back to Baja sometime soon.
I haven't written it off, if that's the question.
I'm hoping you're coming with me on a trip with Marcus and maybe find something more vintage than your Porsche. Or you can.
I've got a question, actually.
You're welcome to come in the Porsche on my winter trip, because that's for vehicles of any age.
I have a 1989 BMW 325 iX. It's four-wheel drive. It has a limited slip rear diff, limited strip transfer case, but might not have the clearance.
I have one spot open in the summer vintage. I think if you got a puck lift on that thing and got 2 inches of clearance, you're in.
Okay, I think that car would be amazing. It's just the deep ruts in the sand might be a problem, but I think it's a pretty cool rig.
Yeah, we have some 2-wheel drive postal Jeeps coming on that trip with high school auto shop kids. And the interesting thing, again, so we're getting back to. I'm leading a class at the Overland Expo next weekend about less is more. Less is more. So if you're a rancher in Baja, you've got a 40-year-old Ranger on 3 bald tires with no suspension. The suspension's totally shot. And you may be leaking some fluids, and you may be down one cylinder, frankly, and you certainly don't have all of your headlights and taillights working. And so if you're starting there, which I always am, to say those are the guys who are driving the roads that we're going to drive, those are the guys who are driving those roads every damn day.
100%.
Your BMW, was that the white one on the corner there? Yep. It caught my eye. Let me just tell you. It's parked around the folks, for the record, it's parked around the corner from the brewery at Sonoran Rover. And it's a beautiful white 325 iX. Is that what you said?
Correct.
Yeah. And so it caught my eye as I was turning the corner and coming around the back of the brewery here. Seriously, if you put in a 1 or 2 inch lift on that, or some all-terrain with no lift, you're fine.
Okay, sweet. I mean,
you're fine.
taken it in some sand, and it's done pretty well. For me, it was just be about the clearance, but
I have a toe
think it would make
strap.
it. Well, and also that's the other thing. Like back to your point, I used to joke about this. I had the same story where you could be down in it was always Baja, and you could be in your brand new Toyota Tacoma with your tents and all this stuff, and you'll be in the middle of nowhere thinking you're kind of a badass, and all of a sudden a Toyota Corolla with no doors would go by and 11 people in it, and you're 100 miles off dirt between the next town.
So
all right,
I'm going to just be self-serving here. My very first off-road experience was in a Toyota Corona, which is a totally unknown car. My sister nicknamed it Charlie Brown because it had a dark brown vinyl roof, and it was really kind of, baby poop yellow. And all it needed was the brown striping that Charlie Brown had on his shirt. But it had 165 14s street tires, and I drove to the El Marmol, I think it's 22 miles each way on a dirt road to go check out the onyx mine. And we didn't air down. We didn't do anything special. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have satellite communications. We had a cooler full of beer. We turned down a dirt road. We drove down 22 miles. We checked out an old onyx mine. We turned around and drove back. And I tried to drive carefully, but I was probably, I was probably 21 or 22 at the time, so I was also drifting.
Yeah, you buried it in the carpet.
I was also rally driving the thing,
sure.
And I think the whole idea of having Instagram tell you what you need to go to Baja is utterly false.
Oh, totally. I just learned today. I didn't know this story. My older brother went to Laguna San Ignacio to go whale watching with my dad when he was 10 years old in a 1967 El Camino. There is nothing worse for the sand than a car with a huge heavy V8 up front, no weight in the back, and rear-wheel drive. And they made it,
Interesting, the first Mexican 1000 had the Ford version, which is a Ranchero. So whatever that would have been, a 66 Ranchero came on that trip, and I'm sure they just thought, well, this is a good place to put all the spares in the back, but nothing could have been worse. But in those days, they made it. They made it all the way down to La Paz. If you go slow enough, you can make it. And I think that's where we're going to end it, folks. If you go slow enough and you have a good beer in the cooler, it's going to be just fine. So, Jeremy DeConcini, thanks for making a little time for Slow Baja. Thank you very much for making this fabulous Mexican lager, the Slow Baja Mexican Lager. We got a full stack here. We got some empties. We got some fulls. We've got it all. Jeremy's cracking open another one. Hear the pop, folks. If you come to the brewery, and I sincerely hope you do, I know it's going to be a hot summer, so maybe we're not going to get to it immediately, and you're going to come in the fall. It's on tap. It's going to be on tap for a long damn time.
It's going to be summer slow for us, so yeah, it might be around in the fall, but maybe we just have to make it again.
All right, let's hope so.
Cheers.
Jeremy, thanks, buddy.
My pleasure.
Thanks for spending some time with Slow Baja.
You got it.
Hey, I hope you liked that one. Jeremy DeConcini, talking beer, talking Baja, talking adventure, talking travel. If you like what I'm doing here, folks, I implore you, drop a taco in the tank. You can do that by clicking the donate button. It really does help, and I really do need your help. If you don't have any tacos, well, I get it. I'm usually in that state, the taco-free zone. And you can still help Slow Baja by dropping a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. That does help. It helps people find the show, and I'm sure that has some long-term help, whatever. I don't really know. It certainly helps with your karma. All right. We've got some hats in the Slow Baja shop. We've got those brand new Keep Baja Slow stickers. You've got to buy some of those. Buy some Keep Baja Slow stickers. Slap them on your Yeti cooler. Slap them on your bumper. Slap them on your water bottle. Slap them anywhere. But get some and help me keep doing this Slow Baja thing. All right, well, it's the time in the show that I love where I tell you about my pal Mary McGee, Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Famer, AMA Hall of Famer. Mary McGee, she had a pal named Steve McQueen, and Steve McQueen loved Baja. Steve did. He really did. Steve said it. Baja is life. Anything that comes before or after is just waiting. People always ask me, what's the best modification that I've ever made to Slow Baja? Without a doubt, it's my Shieldman seats. You know, Toby at Shieldman USA could not be easier to work with. He recommended a Vario F for me and a Vario F XXL for my navigator Ted, as Ted's kind of a big guy. And Toby was absolutely right. The seats are great and they fit both of us perfectly. And let me tell you, after driving around Baja for over a year on these seats, I could not be happier. Shieldman, Slow Baja approved. Learn more and get yours at shieldman.com.